I was lucky or unlucky, depends how you look at it. Because as a Minister of Tourism, I'm also the chairman of our national airline, Gulf Air. And it's quite clear now that the two most affected sectors because of the pandemic were the aviation and hospitality sector. So I was unlucky because I had to deal with both of them from the very first day till today. They are, like you said, the last to recover from this pandemic. But I was also lucky and fortunate to be part of what we call Team Bahrain. And Team Bahrain was a concept that was launched by His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, Prime Minister. And it started out as a slogan, a hashtag. And what it meant is that anybody could serve Bahrain from anywhere, whether you were a citizen, a foreigner living in Bahrain, a government official, a volunteer, or belong to the private sector. And he launched it just before COVID. It had nothing to do with COVID. And then it became really evident during the pandemic, because what was a concept became a reality, and it even went on our masks as Team Bahrain. And we saw companies putting it on their headquarter buildings, big posters, Team Bahrain. We saw kids in schools posting it, sports activities embracing it. And that became really the unifying force to fight COVID. So if you ask me how we handled COVID, I think we're very fortunate to have the leadership of His Highness, who started combating COVID as early as January 2020. And by the 11th of February, he had set up a war room and a task force led by him personally, which met twice a week formally, and a war room that was working around the clock. And that was 3.5 weeks before the first detection of a case in Bahrain. And this early start gave us enough room to plan, not to panic, and to always have foresight and look ahead. And from day one, the vision was very clear, that we will break the war against COVID into phases. The first phase was health. How do we quickly make sure that the nation is well stocked on everything from masks, gloves, sanitization, to ICU beds, to medical capacity. And that really was started in the first, I would say, month, maybe a month and a half. We doubled hospital capacity in that period. We went from 120 fully kitted ICU beds with staff, medical, doctors, nurses to 500 in that period. And we had more than enough of any medicine we needed, any outwear, clothing we needed for our medical staff. Because His Highness' vision was very clear that COVID medically will get sorted someday, and we were diluting the packages to the most affected sectors. We are now in phase 3, which is reigniting our economy. And there we've launched strategies going up to 2026, focusing on main sectors. Tourism is one of them. We made it public. We had it done in consultation with the people involved in the sector. Because we did all that, we didn't have a day of shutdown in Bahrain. Our airport and borders were functional, albeit Gulf Air, for example, we used to have 160 takeoffs a day. At the lowest, we were doing 4 flights a week because simply the world shut down on us. We couldn't fly anywhere that was shut down. We did a lot of repatriation flights, not just for Bahrainis, for many different nationalities through Bahrain back to their countries. We're very proud of that. And we recently did a huge, the Afghani refugees. We did a lot of them from Bahrain to the US, and Gulf Air was the first airline to do that. And we transported almost 8,000 people from Afghanistan. So we managed to learn lessons from COVID, how to react quickly, how to move quickly, and I think this is the success that we enjoyed in every crisis, there's a lesson to be learned. And if you ask me what is the lesson we've learned in COVID in Bahrain, is how to work as a team, forget our differences, look at the bigger picture, and how to move quickly and look ahead. Because there's nothing worse than taking a decision, critical decision, under pressure or being pushed back to the wall. I think we were prepared from day one, because I think we were lucky enough to have the country effort led by His Highness. And the team, the core team for that was, I would say, around 40. I was there, and so was the Minister of Health and many others. So all the decisions were done in coordination. IT was involved from day one. One of the things His Highness asked is to develop an app for that. It was up and running in 10 days with contact tracing. We were very successful with that. The war room I mentioned started with 40 people, and it's still ongoing, but at its peak it was 650 people. It included everybody, and one of the huge successes we've had with the Ministry of Health is the vaccination program. We promoted it together. We said we won't shut our borders, but we encourage people to vaccinate. We didn't force anyone. We allowed people to come in with vaccination certificates. We built green passes with many countries. Israel is one. And today we're very proud to have 96% vaccination rate in Bahrain and 80% with 3 jabs or more. And we vaccinate from 3 years old all the way to the elder citizens. Yes, there is definitely more room to improve. I think in the beginning it was a tug of war between not just tourism, but everybody against health, and I feel a lot of respect and a lot of sympathy to the health officials, because they had to face everyone, and they had to face the whole world with so much little in their hands. They didn't know much about the disease. They didn't know how to cure it, how to face it. You said you were planning Easter in Portugal. As a chairman of Gulf Air, I was telling the team in March, add more flights in June, because people will just want to fly to anywhere after being restricted for 3 months. 2 years later, we're still not back to our flying capacity. And you fly to many airports in the world today, and you see grounded aircraft all over the world. So the scope is there. I think it's been a learning curve. It's been a journey. There was a lot of cost paid, human life, even on the medical teams. But the learning curve has been for both of us. And like Adil said, it's not just tourism. We've all learned the importance of tourism to the economy, especially in a country like Bahrain, 1.5 million population. We have 14 million tourists, and we have 0 local tourism. Maybe in Morocco or bigger countries, you develop a domestic tourism industry. In Bahrain, we can't do that. We can't. The population and the distances are not far enough to sustain 700 square kilometers and 1.5 million population. You cannot sustain a sector on domestic tourism. So while our borders were open, others could not leave their countries to come to us. So you need both sides of the equation. And I think the biggest failure of the world in dealing with the pandemic, and I have to say failure with a loud voice, is that we couldn't develop a common practice in 2 years. Till today, you have countries with different practices, different vaccination protocols, different quarantine protocols. We had to suffer as an airline, even with flights in the sky with passengers heading to destinations, while in air, they say, we shut down. Or now we have 14 days quarantine instead of 7. Or this nationality is not accepted. What do you do with somebody 35,000 feet in the air? Literally, what do you do with them? We had to turn flights back to Bahrain. We had to bring them into Bahrain. Some of them are connecting passengers. We'd had countries who refused to take back their own citizens. No, I'm not kidding. This was the case. When I first read the circular, I said, no way. How can a government say to a citizen, you're not welcome back to your country? I had to personally call the ambassador in Bahrain. I said, is this a typo or is this? He said, no, this is a decision. They will not be allowed back. And they had to stay in Bahrain, 2 weeks quarantine, to go back to their country. So the world was really silly in dealing with it. Very slow, very bureaucratic. Until today, we don't have a common practice in the world. Imagine if the world had decided back in May, I'm not saying March, May, okay, this is how we'll deal with corona. This is one form. Everybody applies the same information. This is the protocol. We all have to quarantine or not. We all have to vaccinate or not. It would have made life much easier for everybody, safer for us as travelers. We could have used that data to explore more possibility with data manipulation, with statistical analysis, and we could have all spoken one language. But I'm very sad to say that with all the technology, all the wealth, all the science we have, 2 years later, we still can't find a common denominator in this.